right, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started. I have a couple things to say beforehand anyway, so it'll give it a little bit of time that there. But anyway, welcome to the second I Think I Can't Speak for Everyone Here reading series. This is a reading series I started for writers, people who have written, are writing, or who I feel should be writing. Though poetry is, my way of languaging the brevity that pierces my own longing. It is the writer's space, whether it's the who I invited or the open mic. You can read, vignettes. You can be silent. You can read excerpts from a novel, paragraphs, anything from the part of you that writes down the world. It is your space. Also, anyone, writers included, featured writers included, can duck out at any time due to life happening, unhappening, comfort level, etc. That said, whether reading or not, you can turn your camera on or off due to your comfort level. Please keep audio off during anybody reading, unless there's something that absolutely needs to be said, something you're seeing that I'm doing that's incorrect or something, definitely unmute and say it or drop it in the chat directly to me. Also, you can direct message me if you didn't already sign up for the open mic. You can direct message me in the chat. Just write your name, any pronunciation notes, and open mic, and I'll get you on that once the featured readers are done. Afterward, if you have any questions or comments, you can direct them to bluejawedsnake@gmail.com, and I did put that email in the chat. If you need a transcription of the reading, as I said before, you can email me at bluejawedsnake@gmail.com as well, and I'll get that to you. So kind of the layout, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first reader, then they'll read, second reader, then they'll read. Once they've both read, I'm going to have a question for each reader. And after that, I'll get to the open mic. If you have any questions for either reader during their reading, you can put those in the direct chat to me, and I'll try to get them to them at that time. And with that being said, I think we'll go ahead and get started. First reader is going to be Tom Snarsky. Tom Snarsky is the author of the chapbooks Threshold, From Another New Calligraphy, and Complete Sentences from Broken Sleep books, as well as the full-length collections Light Up Swan and Reclaimed Water, both from Ornithopter Press. His book, A Letter from the Mountain and Other Poems, is forthcoming from Animal Heart Press in 2025, and the title poem is available to read on Metatron Press's Glyphoria platform. He lives in the mountains of northwestern Virginia with his wife Christy and their cats, and you can find him on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Tom Snarsky. I have a little note. Tom's poems for me, they stay with you in a way that you seek out their reappearing. They are wild poems that attend their taming. Might they word the world. And I'm super excited for you to hear him read. And with that, I'll go ahead and give Tom the spotlight.
Cool. Yeah, my face popped up here. I'm like, now it's real. Thank you so much, Barton, for that extremely kind introduction. And thank you all for being here and listening in. It's so great to see some folks who I know from the big old internet who have read on Nightlight or who are just here and wonderful. And I'm so excited to be reading too with Darren, whose poems I've been admiring for a long time since the Emily poems first started appearing. So it's so cool to be here and to be doing that. I'm going to try. We'll see if this works. And if it doesn't work, then you all can tell me and I will throw this idea in the garbage. I'm going to try to share my screen so that you can look at the poems if you want. You don't have to look at them, but if you want to, it could be cool. Let's see. Does this work? Can you see things that look like, hey, great, thumbs up. Thank you so much for giving me some kind of feedback that this is working. So I'm going to start, and you can just ignore all the tabs that are up there because yeesh. But I want to start by reading a poem by another poet. I like kind of starting readings this way when I can, just because it reminds me that poetry is a conversation, and it is a nice way to sort of let in some more voices other than just mine. And I wasn't sure what I was going to read first, but then my friend friend Joe Ianni, who's a wonderful poet. He's at WTF is a poet on social media and stuff. He wrote this poem like yesterday or this morning and sent it to me. And I was like, this is really doing a lot of what I've been feeling lately. So I asked him if he'd be okay with me reading it. And he said yes. So this is a poem by Joe Ianni. I don't think it has a title, so I'm just going to read it. Pure joy in the background screaming, its siren, the clouds like bubble wrap, my imagination impaired, ajar, full with bundles of string and 2 bottles of magnesium, left out for whomever this brimming and overwhelming graciousness prayer finds us at our tiredest, misspelling and sweaty, singing stupid little songs about our love affair with the world, unbothered by failure after failure. Alight with the smile only a crook knows, stealing and littering, making deals with the pearls inside them to quit for once for all. I love that poem so much. And that's again by Joe Ianni, who's on Twitter and Instagram at WTF is a poet. Joe has one chapbook out called Inside, 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 and he has another chapbook that's coming out sometime in the not too distant future that I'm very excited for. The first poem of mine, it's a Small Poem Sunday. If you've been on social media with me at any point, I do like this little hashtag every Sunday, asking people to share small poems by them and by other people. So I'm going to share a couple of small poems. This one's called Ripped Whisper. Teach me how to kill time or joy, but not both. The fog reflected in the pond looks brighter. I read Nerval way too late and love how he believes in God because his friends want to hear him talk. Those last couple of lines from Nerval are from that part in Aurelia where he talks about he wakes up like at a hospital having just kind of had an episode. And he's like like he kind of has this scene describing the doctors and they're really cold and cruel. So he leaves the hospital not feeling any better, but then he talks with his friend who just listens for a little while to what he's been like. And he's like, yeah, this is the most curative thing of the whole thing. It like reminded him that he believed in God. And I was like, that is such a beautiful moment. This poem is from a new manuscript I'm working on called Mountebank, which don't know what'll happen with it, but any excuse to bring Elliott Smith into the conversation. This is called Death or the Chromaticism of Elliott Smith. There's always the bitter tears of Petra von Kant problem. We want them to think of us more than anything else. But if they do, if they add even a layer of aragonite to the sand grain idea they might care back, it's bags packed and off, wordless into the night. An adjudicator moon stays for a few daylight hours just to hear both sides. You can't hide a horse in a closet, the mother of a little girl quotes her on TikTok as saying. This is the reason she gives for why her horse cannot be the school pet in the event her class actually needs to use that locked away bucket, their hands full of things to throw. I wouldn't be able to protect him. I don't want him to die. Why lie to a child when the truth is right there? All its collisions and day drinking insurance assessors pretending they remember what to do. In Alameda, Elliot sings, shuffling your deck of trick cards over everyone. Like the best Elliot's in the version. Over, like the verb was lord or hang rather than shuffle, a random act you can lie about, like anything. I should also say that aragonite is, I think, what pearls are made of, but I better fact check that poem at some point. I was at a poetry reading a couple weeks ago in New Hampshire where one of the poets was also a singer and a vocalist. And I was like, that's really cool that you could do that. I've learned that I can't do that, but it's a lot of fun to try in these small little snippety ways. I think of like Jack Spicer when he reads the Holy Grail, he like sings little bits of it. And it's a lot of fun. This is another small poem for a Small Poem Sunday, and it's called Artifact Ave. When you see my death, will you tell me? Hold the envelope up to the light. Middle school, beautiful anger, tiny wind in the mouth of a rabbit. 3 vultures on the roof, one with a foot in the chimney. The ash of little answers I brush out in the spring, like your hair. This poem is a fiction poem as opposed to a nonfiction poem because I haven't actually swept out our chimney for this year yet. So even though it's decidedly spring, it is so the spring by now. Spring chores that can just, get delayed until you want to do them. This next poem is called Shape Sorter, and yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to say besides that the shape sorter, I think, it was the best generic name I could come up with for that thing where you put the square pegs in the square hole and the round things in the round hole, except like there's that video that came out a while ago of like it always going into the square hole and that person kind of their face recoiling with horror as every shape went into the square hole. Shape sorter. What's crazy is we live long enough to toss ourselves differently into the waves of time. Like as children, pain was endless, intolerable. And now weeks float by like coriander in the potato soup of being not our parents, but not entirely not them either. Snow falling more in the memory now than in real life. Mid-Atlantic winters, mostly gray duration, punctuated by rain and surprise 65-degree days. Fresh apples in the grocery store, edible stickers that tell you the 4-digit code to type in when they won't scan. The man who invented the barcode scanner helped me survive my teaching career, all 7 years of it, by giving me money. I spent the money on things like whiteboard markers and laminated posters with messages such as, quote, the essence of mathematics lies in its freedom, end quote. Set theory has a high body count when it comes to madness. Contour lecturing on Bacon Shakespeare connections that no experts now believe, because to look directly at different infinities for too long must just be so inconsonant with living, in which most seeds crack open but don't grow, or are flooded to the surface to feed the birds. Asphalt worms, displaced snails, the whole system of governance that emerges when pack animals need to move upstream. Even the phrase pack animal. Does it mean animal in a pack or animal I've put a pack on? I try to tell someone I love I'm here if they need to talk, and message says seen. The cats take turns rubbing their faces on the new fish toy I got for mackerel, and Christy shows me a video of a possum doing the same thing, slubbing a pillow that smells like his mom until the wildlife rehabber pries him gently but firmly away. The other day I tried to pray, but my mouth wouldn't form hail, probably too low. All seriousness, though, do you let ice from the sky hold your tongue? Why not? One long, hideous thought I have kept to myself. What if I've been good enough, cue drums, the whole time? Keep checking my little timer that I have. And when I did that reading in New Hampshire, which was like 2 weeks ago, I realized I left the timer going the other day. And so I had been, technically doing a poetry reading for like almost 200 hours, which felt pretty apt. And that's about right. But luckily I hit the lap button. So this is a second lap. This poem is called 50 Days, which I think is what Pentecost means. Someone cut the middle out of the book of love and put a poem in it called Of Expiry, which begins, quote, one fatherless afternoon, line break, I brought in the mail, line break. It was all politicians, line break, and offers to accept money, line break, in exchange for diverse services, line break, none of which I need now, line break. The language of relentless imperatives, line break, has started to get to me. I line break have this blue shirt that doesn't line break fit anymore, but I still line break put it on line break sometimes just to see if line break my body remembers line break how to shrink from loss. Somewhere in Chaucer, there's a story about Saint Cecilia preaching and converting people after surviving a fire bath and 3 executioner strikes to the neck. The shirt still doesn't fit, so I go outside. The miracle of Saint Cecilia is not that she doesn't die. It's that she does when God decides. I'm going to close with 2 poems. I'm scrolling and making sure. Oh, no, 3 poems. Oof. All right. So this poem is called Tree of Life. And this is in a book called A Letter from the Mountain and Other Poems that's coming out next year from Animal Heart Press. The epigraph to this poem is from Margaret Lanterman. Does anyone in the chat want to throw out who Margaret Lanterman is? I'm sure we have people here who know who Margaret Lanterman is. Or you can answer with an emoji. I'm sure we have some Twin Peaks viewers in the house. And if you don't know who Margaret Lanterman is, I also realize I now can't see the chat. So I'm asking you an impossible question because I'll never know if you've answered it. But Margaret Lanterman is the log lady from Twin Peaks, played brilliantly by Catherine Coulson. And in that kind of like bonus sceney thing, I think that goes with Twin Peaks, one of them is just her looking at the camera and saying, one day the sadness will end. And this poem is called Tree of Life. On days when it's looking up, life insurance payout restrictions bad, think of a little patch of bluebells in the shade. It's dark, yes, now, but the sun is already beginning its morning transit. We'll shift the loudness of shadow and light until those flowers, too, see their moment of warm attention. It will pass, yes, that moment. Do not mistake this or be afraid. The stems will shiver bluely again in evening for a brief time, but then the moon will appear, its low glow giving everything a dim and constant light. Cheating, reminding myself. Okay, yeah. Thank you. This poem is called Infanticide and Foxes. I'm going to read this one and then one more. Infanticide and Foxes. By heart, old ticking thing. Pond overflow runs behind the trees, naked as the day they were taken for born. A cub, handled too roughly and carried by his spine, dies and is buried under wool tangles, to be dug up again in a few hours for food. The 4 weeks before that spent below ground, a little Gethsemane of learning to see. The good isn't something we can trust or know. Stress of the first-time mother hiding in a barn from snow. And then the last poem I'm going to read is the closing poem from A Letter from the Mountain and Other Poems. I'm always tempted to read A Letter from the Mountain, but it's like 42 printed pages long. So we're not going to read that, the whole thing, but I'm going to read the closing poem instead, which is one of my favorites in the book. It's called Keep Talking. Pounding for sapphires, my life continues like a court case neither party has their hearts in anymore. Legal fee days give way to sluice water nights. The river is so cold you can't do a whole pan in one go. You have to split it up like gravel in the crusher. My dreams have gotten harder and harder to remember. I know I'm still having them somehow, but most mornings I awake blank, alarmed and disprepared. Asparagus touches my head gently, with a paw through the rods holding up the stair rail. Are you okay? Says his face. Yes, you're okay, says his walking away. Thank you so much. I will pass the mic. I don't actually know how to pass the mic back to you, Martin, but I will do that. And thank you so, so much, everybody. It's been a wonderful time. I'm excited to hear Darren read.
Well, thank you, Tom. That was amazing. I will say a couple things. Number one, thank you for singing. That was actually pretty amazing. I don't think we've had that yet. And I really like the fact that you read someone else's poem and then the line about time or joy, like you got to kill one of them, but God forbid you kill both at the same time. And as for fact checking, which you'd mentioned, yeah, that's always something that you know you should do or should not do. But I remember I had a poem where I had a dog pawing at a mirror, and I had a reply guy uh tell me that dogs don't actually do that. But it worked for the poem spiritually, so that was like okay. But yeah. And also the whole hiding from snow in a barn, that was that hit me, you know, being from Ohio and everything. So thank you so much for being here. That was absolutely amazing. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and introduce Darren Demaree, our next reader. Darren C. Demaree is the author of 21 poetry collections, most recently In Defense of the Goat, as it continues to wander towards the certain doom of the cliff from April Gloaming, a book I highly recommend. He is a recipient of a Greater Columbus Arts Council grant, an Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award, the Louise Bogan Award from Trio House Press, and the Nancy Dew Taylor Award from Emrys Journal. He is the editor-in-chief of the Best of the Net anthology and the managing editor of Ovenbird Poetry. He is currently working in the Columbus Metropolitan Library System. I came to Darren's poetry completely when I attended a Gramercy Books reading of his that he hosted and read with Kaveh Akbar and Paige Lewis. And I've been wanting to be in attendance since. Darren pins the moment to its unrevealed location on the map, then lights up that surrounding area with its remembering. And I'm super excited for you to hear him read, and I will put the spotlight on Darren.
Well, thank you, and you've always been incredibly generous to me, so I appreciate it every time. If I'm remembering correctly, you were at the reading at Como Recovery. Were you there for that one? Yeah. So I did this very ornery thing where I put out a book about Ohio and opioid addiction, and I got lucky enough it won an award, and then used that to make money for folks in addiction. I did not sell a ton of copies of that book, but you know what? We did monthly readings for Como Recovery and the launch of Como Recovery, and anytime I can give back to that community, that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, so I'm reading today from, I'm old enough now that I've got a selected poems book, 20 years of work, that's going to be coming out, I believe next year sometime. And Tom, you said Emily poems, and there are obviously some Emily poems in this book, so I'll start with those. And then just right before I sent the manuscript to the publisher, I added my new favorite poem that I've written, and when I get there, I'll end the reading with that. So I appreciate everyone being here. It says, Emily as a smile would have ruined the picture. There was one look, one picture of Emily in a bathtub right before we got married. She was traveling with her family. She was in Madrid or Paris or Istanbul. She had been gone for a couple of weeks, so I had been drunk for a couple of weeks. So she sent me a picture of her in her bathtub, one breast covered, hair in a way I'd never seen before, looking directly at the faucet. And so surely did the tatters of my world collected into a whole woman so beautiful that when I got the picture, I accidentally deleted the picture. I remember it clearly, though. Her face, elegant, angry that she didn't have her hands wrapped around the back of my head to pull me off the bottle. She wanted to bury me in her beauty, and that almost worked too well. I am sober. I don't have that picture. I have Emily. She looks at me now. That poem will always stay with me because this book had been was a finalist for the Colorado Poetry Prize, a finalist for the Wheeling Prize, all these things, and I just couldn't get the book to come out, despite everyone seemingly liking these Emily poems. And then Gary Lovely, who runs Harpoon, and is a manager at a bookstore here in Columbus called Prologue, he read it, and that poem right there is what got it published. He said, I really liked it, and then I read that poem and decided that there was no other book that could be Harpoon's first book. So always going to have a special affection for that one. I've got a friend named Sam Roxas Chua who does asemic poetry. He had a book come out on Horizon, and he owns a bookstore out in Portland. And every so often, they play full poetry manuscripts, like over the loudspeaker, right? And he'll send me a note if and when they're playing a recording I sent him. And it's just the nicest thing in the world to be in Columbus, Ohio, and to hear that's like a whole bookstore full of folks in Portland is listening to my voice. Now, I can't sing like Tom, so there's it's not going to be any of that. But just getting to have the poems there is enough for me. So as a thank you to him, I wrote this poem. This is Emily as the Audacity of the Red Egg. for Sam Roxas Chua. The sun is never white. The chest collects only breakable bones. Each new day carries with it a tribe so native to this moment, the wars do not have the time to fill our throats with a second cry. I look to focus my eyes on the landscape, and the fog that once hugged Ohio charges me. I relax my gaze, and I see Emily as a red egg paused on the impossible tip of love. I see her in defiance of all want. A table cannot starve. So I had a fairly contentious relationship with my, I got a master's in creative writing when I was younger. And the instructors at my school, we'd go back and forth a little bit. And when I started to publish books, I started to get notes from him, sort of congratulating me for different things. And I was about to take the stage at AWP, and Campbell McGrath was about to introduce me for an award, and two of them came over to tell me that they always knew. And I'm just kind of like, you guys called me stupid at a bar once. Anyway, so when I started getting the Emily poems published all the time, one of them sent me a note and said, you should stop writing these. You're doing too much. You should write other things. That would be better. And so in response to that, I wrote my own email that was just a poem, and it was this poem. Emily, as I hold 3 of her shoes. I would write a poem about swans if I gave a shit about swans. The swans you're thinking of, do they have anything to do with Emily? Oh, that always makes me quite happy to read. Actually, I'm having a little bit of a panic flashback. The reading you were talking about at Gramercy, Barton, I brought a whole pack because I was really of poems, new poems I was going to read, because getting to read with Kava and Paige and Ruth, that was big for me. And I put my bag down on the counter there, and they didn't tell me that's where I left it. So all of a sudden, my plan went to shit, and I had to grab one of my books from the shelf to read from it instead of like my whole plan. And then at the end, when we were leaving, they handed me my bag, and I went, God damn it. It's okay. I'm much more prepared for this reading. This is Emily. She dropped the lantern at my feet, and then I've got 4 or 5 non-Emily poems that I'll conclude with. I always wear cotton, just in case Emily needs me to go up in flames. I get to be the one that holds her fire. How tender of her to choose me from the crashing to burn just enough for her to lead our children to safety. How terrible it must be for a man to have less of a purpose than to be burned like me. So I wrote a book called A Child Walks in the Dark. I've got 3 kids. It's a miracle that really only one of them has come up here so far, but she brought me a fizzy water, so that's cool. And I wrote this book of sort of missives for them, that if you could talk to your children like you talk to other adults, if you could explain things to them like you would another adult. This is another one of those linchpin poems that the book wasn't the book until I wrote it, and then I figured out exactly what the rest of it needed to be. This is, you might choose to read these poems. I told my children, you might choose to read these poems in the bareness and anxiety of your young adulthood, while you search for me in the thousands and thousands of poems I have written, so that I could explore, so that I could explain, so that I could hide and lie about some small terribleness. And it gives me endless joy that you will find me here, right now, as bare as you are, but feeling no anxiety at all, because I am with my children in some small way in the future, when I love you even more than I already do, because that's how real love works. It grows with the epic. It encircles the epic until you cannot tell why or how any of this began, but you know that if there is such a thing as a soul, it exists to be buoyed by moments like this. I get pushback occasionally for the line about having written thousands and thousands of poems, but I'm here with Tom and Barton, and so that this is a comfortable place to say that line out loud. Y'all are writing as much as me, and I appreciate that. So I've been editing this book, and it started out at about 225 pages before I sent it, and we're down to a crisp 115. So we're getting there. Apparently, I think I'm quite good, and then we're just working our way backwards. This is as I grew up surrounded by James Wright's suicidally beautiful football players. So again, Tom, I love it when you get to speak with another poet. And if you're from Ohio, James Wright looms large. His son, Franz Wright, looms large. And this is maybe is this the most famous poem an Ohioan's written, maybe? Autumn in Martins Ferry, Ohio, right? And I write these sports. I played sports for a long time. I played sports in high school, played sports in college. And when I find that sort of focal point of sports and poetry, I get especially excited. And Words in Sports Quarterly has been nice enough to publish these most of the time. We all lose the treasure as we lose sight of what stands out as treasure in the flat places of Ohio, where Wright had us all watching the old men as they watched the young men, and those rafted dreams we all held or dropped dramatically on and off the field, our knees refusing each generation's request. It wasn't even much of a cheer. I didn't know we would all so deeply consider suicide by the time we were 40. Good Lord, only the silence cared enough to follow us. Our bodies, they became bodies. So I'm going to read 3 more. I've been trying to, especially during the pandemic, write some more domestic poems. The idea of gender roles in the home always makes me nuts. Like my dad didn't really participate in the house. But that always felt lazy to me. I always felt like I want to be the person helping clean. I want to be the person helping with the kids as much as possible. Like that's joy to me. And it's always hard. It's never not hard. But I want to be involved in all of it. So I've got some of these in this book. This is An Easy Dinner. Work or act, we drop our minds into sustaining the momentum. We decide in the moment what will keep the 5 of us from being overtaken by the light, by the wind, by the end of the day when we don't care so much about labor's gnawing or life's thrusting panic. The children all want to order pizza again. We all want to order pizza again. But there's broccoli left over and some rice, 2/3 of a chicken breast. The oldest child makes her own dinner with fresh food because she can. The middle child asks for dessert. The youngest remembers the mac and cheese her Monday caregiver made for her. It's a victory that there's a little extra shredded in the store's default cheese bag, so we can sprinkle a bit of it on top of the macaroni to make it new again in a way the youngest child doesn't want. My partner uses avocado oil to heat a veggie burger. I start doing the dishes while the microwave counts down to what noise. New plates arrive. I eat my gifts. It's bedtime, so I make pancakes for everyone. The middle child asks for dessert. I make a pass at my partner. She says tomorrow night and tomorrow night. That's enough of a needle. Who cares about thread? So the poem that ends the selected poems book right now, and obviously that'll change several times. But right now, this is my favorite new thing I've written in the last couple of years, and was very lucky that Diode Poetry picked it up to put it in the last issue. I'd been working on all my new work. I finally, even after having worked in the library system for 5 years, I never wrote library poems. And so that's what I'm working on now. there's a spine of book band poems. There's a spine of all these different things that I'm integrating together into the collection. And this poem doesn't fit in it, but it sort of has the same attitude that, I think people are still figuring out exactly what public libraries are doing. But one of the things that always catches me surprised is how museums sort of propose to do the same things that libraries do, but they're going to charge you 6 days out of 7. And public libraries are always free. So this poem is called The Museum is Free on Sundays. And before I read, I want to say thank you to everyone. I always mention this at the end of all my readings. I've been sober since January 24th, 2012. And this hour that was coming all day for me, I knew I wasn't going to have to worry about this hour because I was going to be with you folks, getting to read and experience poetry and even hear some new voices at the end. And this is an easy hour. They're not always easy hours, but I appreciate you folks being here and listening to the poems. The museum is free on Sundays. Woozy in the blue breeze, I found the bastard's conduit in the sponsorship and the naming of the sponsorship after capitalism's dead wife. Look, the tethers have all been cut, and the rope makers have decided to frame the performance while they drown us in oceans of rope. The rupture must, but I refuse to trade 1 day for 6. That shit has only ever given us thresholds and doors and gods and slavery. We sail only because there is wind and a moon. We create thickness as a dance to encourage a proper rubbing. If fire comes, don't trap it in a building. Let it burn like a beast with no plan. I am only for the art that routes us through their melting fat. I am only for the naming that removes the distance between the rabbit's breath and the rabbit's flight. Follow me to the fields. The real fuckery is done hiding, and it's free and free and free and free and free and free and free. Thank you, folks.
Oh, thank you, Darren. That was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah, I agree. Joy is hard. And I am glad, with my anxiety and all kinds of things like that, I am glad for hours like this that make it easier, and hearing those types of things from all the writers today do make the hours easier. I'll also speak a little bit to because it kind of goes into the question I have for each writer here real quick is the prolific, the thing about being prolific and everything. It's kind of the opposite, right? I think we're always kind of writing to erase what we wrote before, so it doesn't always feel prolific. Kind of always feels like we're just trying to be present. And I was actually at a reading recently where Elizabeth Oaker's Wright, Franz Wright's wife, read and actually played some recordings he had done from his deathbed. In a very moving reading, and she kind of talked about his like he never stopped trying to erase what he'd written before. And I had written some things in the chat on that reading, and she sent me a message after that reading saying, kind of speaking to that, constantly trying to be present, and she said it's writers like that are keeping him alive. So I just say, resurrecting that, resurrecting with disappearance is kind of important, especially when we're all just trying to exist in this disappearing world. So yeah, thank you both writers today. The question I have for each writer, and I'll direct it at Tom first and then to Darren, and I hope it doesn't get too deep or granular, but about because of both your ways, I think, of being curious and prolific, engaged, elated by inquiry, and kind of always giving up to the oblivion of answer. I always hear about, I thought the question kind of begs the same. And the question is, I don't really believe in finding your voice, but I do think that every writer has that moment where they hear that thing that sounds like them, right? Where they're like, oh my goodness, I wrote this thing 50 times in different ways, but this is the first time that it sounded like me, and it erases all those things before. And I was just curious if there was a moment, moments, a period, a genesis or an exodus where you heard yourself for the first time after all of the writing, after all of the speaking, or even after all of the not writing. I didn't know if there was maybe a moment or something you could speak to kind of that. Not to put anyone on the spot, but um, so I'll direct it to Tom first. And yeah, go ahead.
Cool. I'm gonna answer your question and block a little bit, which because like I think that it's a beautiful question. I'm going to my bookshelf because I think that you can answer this question with your own stuff. Like you can answer this question with the poem that you wrote that like I think Darren, you mentioned like this idea of kind of like a linchpin poem that can happen where like you sometimes write it and then it tells you like where a book is going or like it can just kind of do it can do this work of like unlocking something. And I think that my best experiences are the ones like my best reading experiences in particular are ones where like it feels like that sort of is happening. Like you read something by someone else and it like often it feels like an act of permission, right? It's like you read it and you're like, oh yeah, a poem can do that. And I think like a lot of it has a lot of those kinds of experiences happen, especially when we're like pretty quote unquote early on in our like reading lives. We have that like formative reading experience that's just like, oh, like you can write a poem kind of like this. So I wanted to read you, I went and grabbed one of my favorite poetry books ever, which is Haida Roser by Ben Mirov. And I wanted to, because like when you said that, like, do you have a moment that made you feel like this? I think reading this poem in this book did that for me, even though I didn't write it. So I'm just gonna steal Ben's poem and read this. It's called Moonlight in the Forest of Mistakes. I wanted to create a place others could see and love. I went to work with a pen and pad and drew a tree. Then I drew another and another. Soon I had a forest, but the forest was empty. I was going about things all wrong. I put a moon above the forest so I could have a little light, but none was shed. I drew a squirrel, but the squirrel didn't budge. I drew a man on a staircase with nothing on top. This could go on forever, I thought. I took a walk through another forest, one I hadn't made. The moon was shining through the trees. A squirrel rustled the leaves above my head. I felt I was being erased a little at a time. I can't say anything better than that, so I'm just gonna end my answer there.
I don't think you could have said it any better than that. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot with a question. And with that, I'll go ahead and direct the same question to Darren. Just to summarize, was there a moment or moments or period or retroactive prediction where you heard yourself for the first time as opposed to finding your voice?
Yeah, I think you find a place where you're confident, where you know that you can do a certain kind of thing well. And for me, that's always been, and it's evident, that place for me is the Emily poems. I feel like I figured out how to do those differently many, many times. But that's my safe place. I'm always confident when I'm writing one of those that I know exactly what I'm doing. I know how to play with the music and energy. I know how to make that tether dance a little bit for the readers. And knowing that about myself, what I'll do is I use that as a touchstone place for me, where I will write those for, let's say, 2 weeks or a month, and then immediately start. I do a lot of project writing, a lot of like if it's a book linked sequence, I map it out the same way you map out a narrative arc. Just because if you're doing a 142 poem thing, or the Trump is a Fire Without Light book with 702 poems that we edited down, you know, you got to plan and work and sort of force your voice into new things. And the experimenting part is the fun. I was doing a lecture on Thursday, and one of the things I was saying was, I would much rather write a bad poem than not write a poem at all. And I would much rather experiment. If you're going to be a lifer, if you're just going to be, I started writing poetry when I was 14 and I haven't stopped. I do it as often as I can, a lot less now than when I was starting to get sober and things like that. And I was doing 3 poems a day for 7 years, essentially just trying to spend as much time as possible doing other things. But I like the challenge. I like writing a book that is completely different than anything I've written before. I like to research for a book. I've only ever done one like form. The luxury was all a strict syllable count thing. And then I like to experiment with prose poems and no punctuation and no, but if you're just going to be doing this and doing it forever, you can't really have fear that you lose your voice. I'm purposely trying to be something else. I'm purposefully setting up a challenge and a topic and something that I've never done before. And it's got to be perfectly fine that it completely goes fuck all, that it just doesn't work at all. And that's okay. I'd much rather spend the time writing poetry than not writing poetry. And I've had plenty of failures that have led to successes down the road. But if you're playing with language as poets do in a way that sort of drills down into syllabics sometimes, into different themes and threads and all these different things you're trying to explore, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But for me, I've got that place I can always go back to. If I'm like, man, I'm lost completely, I can step away and write some Emily As poems and feel confident again. And you got to be confident to take big swings. And so I'll get my confidence from the small swings, and then I'll go be crazy over here and try something. And if I find myself completely lost, I come on back. I'm 43 now. I'm going to be hopefully doing this for another 43 years. So there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of back and forth where I'll disappear for a while and people will have a lot of questions about, well, why is he writing that? But that's fun. I think that's like the number one thing to explain to younger or newer writers is the stakes are not that high, right? It's about you and the process and your experience with it. And if a published poem or a book comes out of it, then that's gravy. That's great. But I never feel anywhere else the same way I do when I am drafting a new poem. I'm not great at promotion. I'm not great at some of the other stuff. But if you give me a chance to be one-on-one with a poem, I don't feel much like that other places. And even if I'm lost, sometimes it's better when I'm lost. Anyway, sorry, that was long-winded, but I appreciate the prompt.
No, thank you for that answer. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny because I mean the Emily poems are same titles, Emily is this, Emily is that, but when I go to them, I'm always expecting I always know there's going to be a portal there, something that leads to something else. It's not just a comfort place for the reader, which I think kind of speaks to the when you're going to that place, you're not using it to retread or whatever. You're using it as a jumping off point or whatever, and I think that's clear to the reader. But yeah, thank you for answering that. Um I feel kind of bad I bring these questions on people, but I am honestly interested, and I do honestly admire both of you as writers, and thrilled that you showed up for this thing and said yes. With that, I think we will move on to the open mic. So the first open mic individual we have is Daniel Flossie, who I actually do not see. Uh, if you're here, unmute yourself, and you can just start, and I'll mute myself and nope. All right.
Hey Barton,
Well,
could I jump in? I'm on my lunch break and I got
yeah,
about 4 minutes left.
yeah, do it. Go ahead. Let me get you on here.
Awesome. Yeah. Sundays are my on days. It's a busy day at work. So last time I got to stick around like 15 minutes afterward, but I think I gotta hop in here real quick. That was really awesome, Tom. That was awesome, Darren. Y'all were killing it, and both of your answers were so just inspiring. As you can see, I got the work drip. So I'm gonna read one poem. I only wrote one poem this week, so I'll read the poem I wrote this week. I've been reading a lot about sports and victory and loss and like my childhood experiences with all that. But this poem is called Boogeyman. My mom made WWE off limits after she left me at a cousin's house and got a call from him a half hour later saying I'd passed out due to a wrestler named Boogeyman. He came drenched top to bottom in blood with a jaw full of live worms that he thrashed wide-eyed at the camera. I thought he was the actual devil I'd heard about from kids in Sunday school. By the time my cousin tried to explain kayfabe, I'd gone pale, holding back vomit, living room spinning, the crowd of worms and Boogeyman's teeth heckling and booing me. For years after that, while walking to the bus stop on rainy spring mornings that forced worms above ground, I'd tear their tender bodies to bits with my shoes. The sidewalks would be painted with their guts, and I'd look down every time thinking, you're nothing. Take that. Feel my wrath. And Jesus would weep harder, his tears washing the blood into the gutter because I'd killed another one of his favorite critters, misunderstood his favorite TV show, strayed harder from his word, become a real little shit, and he'd have to kick my ass one day to set me straight. Thanks. I'm gonna stick around to hear a couple more people until my radio goes off and I'm needed at an emergency. But thank you guys.
All right. Well, thank you, Julian. You're 2 for 2, man. I'm glad you showed up for both, and we'll get you on one of these featured one of these days. I'm a huge fan. Thank you for reading that. That was awesome, and doing it all while working and everything, man. That's what it's about. So yeah. So that said, I think next person we have for the open reading is James Moorhead. I'll go ahead and spotlight you, sir. And
Great. Thank you. A little jet lag. I'm in California. We went to Chicago yesterday as guest poet for the 20th anniversary annual haiku festival, which was on the same day as the 25th annual Chicago Poetry Fest. So the session I was in was right before Ada Limon, U.S. Poet Laureate, took the stage. So I got a chance to actually meet her and get my book signed, and amazing person, just so genuine. So I'm going to read a poem from my most recent book, The Plague Doctor, not about the pandemic. Cool artwork, which I'll show after the poem, a piece of artwork I commissioned. This is actually the closing poem in the collection. I think represents the vibe of the collection. When you perform my autopsy, be prepared. For hidden beneath the clean-shaven skin are gears, actuators, circuits, and optics. You'll find eyes made of glass that blink and dilate, perform the perfect wink, and when called for, even moisten with a tear. My fingers caress, dip cookies into milk, and delicately crack eggs, just like yours. But each knuckle is titanium, not bone. And if you creep behind me on a carpeted floor, you'll hear motors whir as we walk in step. I had to be wired up, you see, because a momentary lapse in judgment took my body but spared my mind. But I'm a Potemkin village of a man, an illusion so real I haven't been outed for what I really am, an imposter, a shadow, an automaton with blood replaced by oil for hydraulic muscles, and my memory merely quantum sparks that will vanish when fusion's chain reaction ends. Perhaps that's why I lie awake each night, staring unblinking into darkness, having forgotten how to sleep, my mind racing at the speed of light, trying to solve the world's problems queued up to infinity. And then I worked with an artist who did 3 pieces of original ink art, hand-drawn, no AI, no digital. And this is the piece that she came up with for this poem. And the title poems piece, which she also did, is also a tattoo on my right arm. And I have the originals. So anyways, yeah, it's a book of poetry and music, and I'll put a link to my Instagram handle in, but I'm so happy to have found this this combination reading series open mic. Just stumbled on this and it's awesome.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I misheard. I thought you said you had one more. Sorry about that. I love the infinity being in a queue. I thought that was super cool. But yeah, I'm glad you stumbled upon this as well. And thank you so much for being part of the open reading. I think we have one more reader, Daniel Siren, who I am going to. Yeah, I'll go ahead and put you up here, Daniel. Sorry.
Hey, thank you, Barton.
A little slow on the draw here.
Thank you to everybody for sharing your poems. I'm thrilled to be here. I have a poem from my book called Resuscitations that I'm going to read. There's the cover. And this poem is titled 5150. And I think I should preface it by saying, for those that don't know, 5150 is the police scanner code for in California for hospitalizations in the psychiatric ward. Basically, police come and pick up people and place them in the psychiatric ward. And this is basically, I wrote this poem to honor my kind of journey and where I am now from where I have been. So here it goes, 5150. Hours go by watching Finch untie strands of mind back together. Witness this earth belong. The cranium is split open by the mere thought of dancing your music with rivers. Thank you for your practice. I'm waking up from a coma, 1988, in a bathtub in a country that can't stand to know itself. I can't take my eyes from peonies. There are too many of them to marvel at. What more world did you ever want, Siren? Smoking midnight's colors through the years of padded rooms. Does anyone at all understand star-stuffed galaxies, plethoras, honeysuckle, sap nor branch nor dewdrops? The distance between lovers, how it folds in on itself, how a heart can break and it is called an attack. Gathering all my being around the clock radio 2010 on the patio of Vallejo, California. Midnight in crystalline silence, cool May air licking lips entranced by Dexter Gordon's ballads. Raining with everything beautiful. All this world happening is too much world happening. You and I simultaneously happening. From heart through heart, branch to branch, root to fruit, soil to sky. If there is any time to be alive, it is now certainly. I have thrived on strange kindnesses, warmth from whence unknown. Here and now in this cave of burning deserts in the mind, have I made a pact with whatever goodness is within myself, my soul carrying on? To see beyond illusion fully, within your own vision fully, within your own being, my own vision, my own being thread together in one inhale and one exhale. In fact, a man may be siphoning gasoline from some used car lot right now on 22nd or anywhere there is someone taking something that is not theirs. The question must be asked, from who is this something taken? And to whom is this something given in return? There seems to be no reprieve human being to human being except compassion, empathy, grace for this sickness the dollar has instilled upon our species, and desire a balancing act, belief that tightrope walker to the lion's mouth, pardon me, meaning new worlds to each spoken agreement between thought and action, word and being, spoken and unspoken, one and another. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Daniel. That was amazing. It is yeah, you know, place in person. The world is too much world. It's very timely, especially now. I that was beautiful. Thank you for taking part. And I have that book. I'm kind of like an impulsive grocery aisle buyer. I see books, I get them in, and I get to them when I get to them. But I do have that book, and I'm going to have some words for you on it. That said, I think that will conclude this this part of the reading series. Upcoming, we've got some coming up with Alina Stefanescu, Dylan Krieger, Nadia Arioli, B. Owens. You know, so stay tuned. I'll keep sharing that stuff. Taking June off, but it's going to be some more readings after May. Then there'll be some more readings in July, and I will probably be reaching out to some of you to take part in those. But anyway, thanks so much for being here, and yeah, I will see you hopefully in the future, if not here, elsewhere. Thanks so much, everyone.